Hello and welcome to a very special instalment of the Full Force Monthly, brought to you by Hoardar, the collector's app. I am Christopher McLeod AKA Diagnostic 80, and in this episode we are previewing Yojo June and taking a moment to bask in the glory of the YoJoe brand currently and assess the insane popularity that the comics and toys are enjoying at the moment. Joining me on this episode is the General himself, Justin Generals Joe's Bell. Okay then, what is it, Justin?
It's the Full Force Monthly.
Yes, it is. Absolutely, buddy. Kind of crazy stuff going on at the moment in the G.I. Joe brand. But how are you, mate? How's things with you?
Doing good. Yeah, I mean, life is busy as always, but no, doing well. I'm glad to have an opportunity to sit in on one of these with you. It's been a little while, but overall, you know, summer's in early swing. You know, daughter's home from college, so life is good.
Sweet. Good to know. Good to hear. Also, as well as you enjoying life right now, the G.I. Joe brand has gone absolutely ballistic. Now, obviously, it's been pretty steady for the last couple of years, hasn't it? Classified has obviously been very successful, but it feels like just at the moment the brand has gone absolutely stratospheric when you take into consideration the amazing blooming Kickstarter that's just happened for Skybound. Let's start with that. How ridiculous has that been? Over 1 million.
Yeah, I think last I checked was this morning, it was at 1.2 million or something like that, and doesn't really show many signs of slowing down. And yeah, I wish I could explain it. I wish I had some sort of analytical breakdown as far as why it is that way. I think Skybound obviously has a lot to do with it. You know, I think they're a pretty big name when it comes to comic publishing. You know, got a lot of good history behind them. You know, from Robert Kirkman and his kind of association with Walking Dead and many other things. Invincible is a big animated series on Prime right now. I mean, there's a lot of things to love about what Skybound is doing, and I think it's just all culminating in this absolutely insane Kickstarter. I think folks sometimes lose sight of just what a behemoth G.I. Joe was in its heyday from a comic perspective. I don't think people realize or necessarily always think about the fact that in the 80s, it was outselling X-Men and Avengers and Spider-Man. I mean, it was literally at the top of the charts. It was a genre-defining comic book series back in the 80s. And for all of kind of its history, there's been a lot of sort of attempts to collect all of the volumes in some sort of cohesive fashion, some successful, some not so successful.
Yeah.
But I think this is really the first time that a company has really dedicated a ton of resources into, let's see just how good we can make this. And you're going to pay for it. I mean, it's expensive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's very deluxe. Really appeals not just to the G.I. Joe collector, but to the comic collector. Lots of different perks and stretch goals and lots of reasons to plunk down a ton of money. So yeah, I think Skybound is really doing a great job with this. And I think it helps certainly that they're getting a lot of visibility with the Void Rivals and the Energon story and the Duke and Cobra Commander series, which are, doing really well. Classified has brought a lot of eyes to the G.I. Joe brand. I continue to see posts on social media from people that I've never heard of, talking about how great Classified is. I mean, you've been in this, I've been in this fandom for 25 years or more, and there's still people that I'm like, oh, who's this? This is somebody new. This is somebody I don't, or this is somebody I always used to see over on Masters of the Universe. So this is somebody that always used to be a Transformers fan, but they're talking about Classified now. Yeah. So I think, for all of the sort of O-ring and 3 3/4 inch purists, who probably aren't a big fan of this new direction, it has brought a lot of more eyes to the brand, and I think we're in a really, really great place right now. My kind of built-in cautious optimism or pessimism, some people might call it, is let's not fumble the ball. We've got the Snake Eyes video game kind of out in the ether that's being worked on. We've got this new movie, Transformers G.I. Joe movie, that's sort of pending, kind of hovering out there. We've got the brand in a really great place just from comics and action figures and pop cultural awareness. I'm just hoping we can, continue that momentum with some really great media of some sort to kind of support the great work that's already being done.
I do feel like that is sort of like a little bit like when these things kick off, like speaking of the Kickstarter, right? The fact that that has broken 1 million, that's going to have some raised eyebrows. That's
Hmm.
going to have some like, interesting kind of things going on at Hasbro, I think.
Yeah.
And that obviously could be, anything from let's look at some comic characters that we can do in the toy line to
Hmm.
let's look at what else we can do to expand this media and all that kind of stuff. Because at
Sure.
the moment, it's doing pretty well without any real media backup. Like, I mean, obviously the Skybound Energon universe has been just great. Like, I have been
Yeah.
so into that. And what Skybound are doing, I think that has a lot to do with why it's been so successful so far. The
Hmm.
quality that they're churning out,
Yes.
the like also it goes quite a long way because I mentioned this on an episode a while back, but I remember when like the IDW, when the brand was with IDW for the comics, I remember that some weeks they wouldn't ship out the comics on time,
Hmm.
and I would be there waiting for my pull list,
Right.
to come in. And it's like, oh, it's going to come in next week, and then it might not come in next week, and then randomly it was there a week, and it's like, okay, I'll grab them now.
Yeah.
And it felt like, just having a regular, accessible sellout they sell out of an issue and they
Hmm.
rerun it. And it's like, it's here again. And here's another
Yeah.
one. How many reprints have we had on like all the way
Tons.
up through to issue threes in some cases? I have not experienced that with GI Joe for for at all. Like, because obviously I wasn't there. I wasn't really there when
Right.
Marvel was absolutely smashing it out of the park.
Yeah, and I will, giving Devil's Due some props. This sort of thing happened with Devil's Due when it first relaunched the series in
Yeah,
2001. There was some very strong initial hype. It got a lot of eyes, a lot of traction. I don't think it was to this level,
nah,
but there was certainly some renewed attention. Of course, Devil's Due had the benefit of sort of being the first continuation of Marvel that there had been ever to that point. Whereas it's kind of happened pretty consistently since then. Um, but yeah, and I think you can't overlook the fact that some people may disagree with the approach, but having kind of individual series per character,
yeah,
not only does that allow them to explore these specific characters more deeply, but you're always sort of constantly getting GI Joe product out on the shelf. I mean, you got two simultaneous series in Duke and Cobra Commander going. There's always, every week I'm like, oh, there's a new comic. Oh, there's a new
yeah,
comic. Oh, there's a new comic because there's two ongoing series that are releasing fairly frequently. So it almost feels like you've got sort of a bi-weekly, GI Joe series going because you're getting two issues a month. So I think that helps. It keeps it in the public eye,
yeah,
keeps people aware of what's going on, and then you've got the Void Rivals thing happening too. Even though one thing I got to give Skybound a lot of credit for is that they are certainly connecting the universe, but not too much.
yeah.
Like, I'll be honest, I haven't read any of the Transformers comics. I haven't. I don't feel like I've missed out on anything. Maybe that's bad. Maybe Skybound would prefer that they're requiring more crossover to boost sales. But from a GI Joe fan's perspective, I'm happy that I can just focus on the Duke and the Cobra Commander limited series and not feel like I'm missing something.
Right, right, and that is
So
the case. I mean, if you look at Void Rivals, they've had the occasional like caress of a crossover with Transformers, but for
right,
the most part, their storyline is very specific, like
yep,
to them. And then the Transformers storyline again has had that little touch here and there,
right,
but I don't even think we've seen GI Joe in the Transformers regular comic yet.
yeah, I don't
We've
think so
only
either.
like their story that they're doing in the Transformers comics hasn't actually technically touched GI Joe yet, but GI Joe has definitely had Transformers,
Yes, yep,
obviously in the Duke issue, and obviously in like uh, Cobra Commander because Megatron's been kind of like
right,
in the background a little bit.
yep,
So they're definitely doing it way more. It's like obviously it's in your face, but
yeah,
it's definitely in each issue. It's very subtle, that crossover. It's like, oh, these things are happening in the same universe.
right.
There you go.
And they're doing it with purpose. I think that one thing that sort of occurred to me as in a recent issue of the Cobra Commander series, like we've all, and I'm not going to spoil anything. Hopefully, the last Cobra Commander has been going on. This last issue I read is came out a week or
A couple
two
weeks
ago,
ago, yeah,
a couple weeks ago. So I'm not trying to spoil anything, but we all know Cobra Law has sort of been an interwoven component to the Cobra Commander series.
yeah,
And we've all been kind of, oh, that's a great Easter egg. I really like how they're doing it. Well, they really tied it together in one of the later issues where I think it's Globulus kind of talking about how Cybertron and the Transformers are like the polar opposite of what Cobra La is. Like Cobra La is all organic. They, all their machinery is organic. Everything they do is built on biology. Transformers is the opposite, like the
Mm,
stark opposite. Everything they do is built on mechanical. They are by their very nature kind of antagonists with each other.
yeah.
And that is a really cool element that I hadn't really thought of until it was mentioned in that comic. And I'm kind of like, wow, they really found a way to tie this together. It's not just some kind of shameless, well, let's throw Cobra La in there
Right.
because the diehards will love it. There really is a purpose to it, and it makes sense, and you can kind of see the natural conflict that is being formed there. So they're crafting this universe with a lot of thought and a lot of, like I said, purpose, which is really, really cool. And the whole element of, Duke witnessing a transformer and going off the reservation a little bit, being nuts, and nobody believes him, and leading into the sort of secret, military organization. It feels really organic and natural. And I think that's really hard to do. I mean, it's a lot. It's easy for readers to kind of say, well, yeah, this makes total sense. Speaking on as somebody who writes fiction for a partial living, that's not easy to make it read
No.
effortlessly. It takes a lot of work to make it something read like it occurs naturally, like you're not forcing something.
Right.
So I got to give those folks a ton of credit, because just little things sprinkled throughout these comics really do a fantastic job. So when you say, it's Skybound isn't just producing these comics, they're producing quality comics. They're really
Yeah.
putting thought into it. That makes a big difference. It really does.
What's funny is obviously we're talking about the quality they're putting into the storytelling, all that kind of stuff. None of this in this Kickstarter has anything
True.
really to do with Skybound. It's just they're packaging it in a
Yeah.
nice way. It's all previous stuff and they're just putting it out there. But even the quality of what they have done so
Yeah.
far with this, with their presentation, with their with just the way they're kind of explaining everything's nice and clear and obvious, and
Hmm.
everything makes sense. And it's all very like, here's another stretch goal. And it's just crazy. I look at it now. I'm just having a quick look at the current situation. And again, how on earth does it keep moving? 1277156.
This thing's going to
Wow.
hit 1.5, if not 2, by the time all this stuff is
I
done. I think that
genuinely think they could hit 2 mil on this one.
the idea that any kind of Kickstarter related to GI Joe would hit $2 million is just like foreign concept. I think
I think
and
that's what it
especially
is, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, it really, for a GI Joe fan, as the GI Joe fandom is so interesting, and it's fun to be a part of it, just because, especially for those of us, who are just turned 50 and kind of were around during the heyday of GI Joe, when GI Joe was the biggest thing since sliced bread. I mean, everybody loved GI Joe. It was top of the heap, best thing ever. To sort of where it eventually came to, where it kind of feels a little bit like the redheaded stepchild. You see Transformers getting reborn, He-Man getting reborn, all this stuff getting a lot of visibility, while G.I. Joe kind of reboots itself every few years and tries to find its footing again. Has finally done so, it seems like, with Classified. But to sort of see something so, and I think we saw it a little bit with the His Tank HasLab too, where you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
wait a minute, we're a big deal again, to a certain degree.
Well, that kind of makes me think as well. Like, obviously we've got Skybound doing amazing things on this side, right?
Hmm.
And on the other side of it, like you just mentioned, we've got the Classified series, which
Yeah.
is, again, I think has taken Joe into a completely different dimension. And I feel like it has pulled in way more new people
Oh yeah.
than anything kid focused would have done. That may be a little controversial to say. I don't know
Hmm.
if you agree with that hot take. If they were to have aimed this or do, I'm not saying that it's like impossible, like they should have done or shouldn't have done, right? I feel like if the team had tried to get young people on board, a new generation, I just don't feel like you're gonna, even with the best executed plan, I don't think you're going to necessarily force that. And I think like this kind of thing, just doing a 6-inch, just brought on loads of 6-inch collectors.
Yeah.
And weirdly, like it feels like a lot of additional new fans just based on 6-inch collectors.
Hmm.
And it kind of probably just, it also shows you the popularity of that scale as well. Like, I don't think I was even aware that, and that's funny because I was collecting Marvel Legends and Black Series, but I don't think I was aware of how it would work with Joe. And I think for a lot of us, it's the vehicles is probably the main thing, isn't it? With
Yeah.
that, with the yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the old story kind of is, how GI Joe was first developed as a vehicle line, and a lot of
yeah,
people still cling to that, and that's fine, that's valid, because that is the truth. You're exactly right about kid. I mean, whether we want to admit it or not, action figures are not really being sold to kids these days. It's just not happening. I mean, and it's probably foolish to keep on trying to force this up. But I think if you look at something like Power Rangers, for instance, which Hasbro invested a lot of money in, really revitalized and tried to capture a collector's market too.
mm,
Although, and maybe people will yell at me and say I'm wrong. Power Rangers, by its nature, is kind of a kids line. Is the way I've always viewed it. Maybe that's just me being old and not appreciating the collector nature of Power Rangers, but. The fact that they couldn't, even though they're producing what were pretty excellent Lightning, for Lightning whatever figures they were,
collection, yeah,
Lightning
yeah,
collection figures, just weren't capturing that market because maybe the kids weren't, the kid audience just isn't there anymore.
yeah,
You have the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, where Netflix produced a pretty excellent CGI Masters of the Universe animated series geared for kids. Revitalized the brand. By a lot of people's opinions, it was actually the superior series compared to Revolution that happened at the same time.
yeah,
Yet the toys never caught on. Nothing really happened with it. It ended after three seasons, I think, 2 or 3 seasons, and it just kind of disappeared.
yeah.
I really think the kid market, as much as I've beaten the drum to death over the years of you got to capture the new generation, you got to do it. Turns out maybe the new generation is 30 something or 20 something year old adults instead of
Yeah.
kids. And maybe that's what the 6-inch line is appealing to. I mean, I am constantly on these Facebook groups seeing, oh yeah, Spy Troops was my first GI Joe line. When are they going to do barrel roll and classified? And you're like, Spy Troops
Mate, I've
2003. I mean,
I've
good
lost count of
grief.
the amount of people that I've seen comment about classified was where they got on the brand. Like
Yeah,
this is their first thing
exactly.
of GI Joe, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh wow, okay, cool. I thought you had to at least have some sort of idea as to what it is in order to be like, oh. But again, I think that's testament to the quality of the figures they're creating, I
It
guess.
it totally is, because you will, like you say, you routinely see people be so excited and say like, "Oh, Night Creeper looks awesome." What's he from? And you're like, "He came out in
Huh?
1990. Come on, get with it." But I mean, they're seeing these cool figures that they love that they don't even know the history of, but they're going to buy them anyway. And then they learn the history and they get even more interested in them. And it's really cool what Classified has done. You've got plenty of us old folk too who are still interested. But it really is tying in some of those newer collectors.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And I will say that there was definitely that talk early on. I saw it more and more a couple of years ago, where people were like, "Where's the 4-inch line?"
Yeah.
We've kind of got O-ring a little bit, we've got 6-inch, but where's the 4-inch? And it did seem like for a while that was like a kind of it would come up a lot. I haven't seen anyone say anything about 4-inch figures for
No.
about a year. Like no comments about it, nothing. And I was seeing that a lot
Yeah.
in those early kind of like that early period, like the 2020 to 2022.
Yeah.
I was seeing that quite a lot.
Yeah. And it
Um,
could be people just kind of gave up asking. It could be,
very
Hasbro's
much so,
tried to
yeah.
do that retro 4-inch line and it just kind of died on the vine. And there's some realization that maybe it's not credible anymore. I don't know. It could be a number of different things, but yeah, you're definitely right.
It's crazy at the moment to be in the position that we're in and talking about a brand now with GI Joe that has just broken over 1 million, is possibly pushing towards 2 million for a reprint of a comic series. Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
I suppose in a way, like I think a lot of people that there are a lot. Obviously, there are, but I think there are a lot of people in that sort of group of people that have pledged. I think there are a lot of people that don't have all the issues
Oh yeah,
and
for
have been
sure.
trying to read the entire run, maybe have wanted to try and collect the entire run for a long period of time. And they're looking at this as like, right, perfect way, just getting everything together.
Yep.
Bosh, away you go.
Yep.
And the fact they're doing like PDFs for it as well, which is kind of cool. Like that's actually quite cool because I know from experience, some of these compendiums aren't the most comfortable to
Oh,
read.
yeah. I mean, these things are the size of an Encyclopedia Britannica. I can't imagine like, oh, I want to read G.I. Joe comics in bed. Here, let me pick this thing up and carry it.
Like
No.
Carson's
Yeah,
coffee table,
exactly.
but
Yeah, exactly. Oh God, I remember getting that in the mail, and my wife was like, "What the hell is this?" I'm
you
like,
needed 3 people to
"Let me get the
transfer it.
pallet jack to move it into the house." Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was that's amazing.
Forklifted it
Yeah,
in,
yeah. But
Justin
you're
in his
right.
little forklift.
Yeah,
His power loader comes out in a power loader.
yeah.
But yeah, like
And honestly, I
yeah,
mean, I like having access to digital versions because there's a lot of times where I might just want to look something up real quick, like an image or something like that. Kind of see what
yeah,
like when Classified includes, or even Super 7 with their Ultimates includes kind of these obscure accessories. Like, I wonder where that's from. I think that's from this issue of the comic, and you don't want to like get up on the shelf and drag down this big
right.
thing or whatever. You just want to open a folder and check a PDF, and having it right there is, I mean, you can't beat that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think they're appealing to a multiple collectors. I think in this one,
Yeah,
obviously, there are a lot of people that just want it because they collect the GI Joe
sure.
Marvel run, and they've got it in every single facet, and they're going to get it again. And I think doing that whole one set is GI Joe, one set is Cobra sort of thing is a marketing genius ploy, because it just seems like we are going up in $600
Oh,
increments
yeah,
each time.
there's just people buying both. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway,
Very much so.
and then, of course, like I said, with Classified as well, you've got this incredible, and I guess at some point there's going to be a marriage of the comics and the Classified series. You kind of expect that now, and I can't, in more so than just redoing Classified figures in the Skybound
Oh,
universe.
yeah. I
I
really
feel,
hope so. I
yeah. Do you
mean,
think that could you see them doing new characters in action figure form based on characters that appear in the comics?
I think they could for sure. I mean, eventually they're going to start running low on, kind of 80s retreads that they can do. And they're going to have to start thinking about some, and they've done that to a degree. They've already started sprinkling some new characters or new concepts. But I think, yeah, eventually they're going to I would love for them to align a little bit more closely with Skybound. I mean, we've already seen it a little bit. Rock and Roll appeared in the Duke limited series, and he very much had his Classified look, had his same tattoos, had the same uniform. It was the Classified version, head to toe. So and I think Stalker was the same way,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, there's Shamak, didn't he? His little
Yeah.
yeah.
So they're doing it. The Skybound side is already taking inspiration from Classified. I think it's just a matter of time before we see some tighter synergy. It may be tricky because, as we all know, there's timing can be difficult, and
Oh yeah.
getting trying to debut a figure in plastic form around the same time they appear in the comic is probably not feasible. So it may happen after the fact, which is fine. I think there are some elements that might get a little tricky. Like I don't want to spoil the Free Comic Book Day issue, but there was a character who appeared there in a very distinctive uniform that you got to feel like is probably a temporary uniform. And does Hasbro want to produce that action figure if in 6 months she's back, or he or them are back to their
they
right,
they
their
are
normal
back.
look?
Yeah.
Yeah, back to the
I think
normal
everyone
look.
knows. I think everyone knows what you're
Yeah,
talking
it's,
about.
it's
But
probably
yeah.
blown by this point, but and I would feel the same way about Mercer. I mean, everybody knows Mercer's an ex-Cobra Viper who becomes a GI Joe, at least back in the old days. We don't know yet if that's what's happening in Skybound, but he has a certain look right now that looks pretty similar to his vintage version, so maybe that'll carry over when he becomes a Joe. But should they do a Mercer and Classified that it looks like the Skybound version, and then kind of have to redo it again when he joins the Joes, if he joins the Joe? I mean, there's a lot of different things they could do that I really hope they seriously consider doing, because we have seen some designs in Skybound that we haven't seen in action figure form, and I'd
Yeah.
love to see an action figure form. I really, really miss that media toy synergy. I think that for whatever reason, that is really important to me, which is bizarre, because even back in the 80s, like there very rarely was toy and media synergy. Like Scarlet, the action figure, always looked different than she looked in the cartoon or the comic. So it's curious that that's so important to me, yet that didn't really exist back in the 80s so much. But I do love it. I love when they can make the action figure look like the page of the comic or the image in the cartoon. So I would really love to see them kind of get closer aligned and work more hand in hand together. And perhaps they will. Maybe they already are. I mean, that would just, I would think $1 million, $1 million to $2 million Kickstarter is going to open some eyes at Hasbro and say, these guys might know what they're doing, even though
That's what I'm
this
thinking.
box set
Actually,
isn't new content,
Yeah.
a lot of eyes are on Skybound.
I think it might possibly open a door for Skybound to lead some sort of animated
Yep,
sort of vibe going in there, because obviously they've already had success with a number of their properties in animated form.
that's a good point.
Um, so I wonder if that could lead to Skybound's GI Joe classified sort of animation.
Imagine like a hardcore Invincible type of, GI Joe animated series. I
Just
don't know if
animate
Hasbro would let him do it, but because I
animate
mean,
Cobra Commander and Duke, man, and
yeah,
I'm there, and Scarlet and Destro, like the
yeah.
mini series.
You
Just
still
do
still
you.
run into those sticky situations with, soldiers in war and all that stuff, but I really think that there's some potential for some cool stuff there. And they've already said that the Snake Eyes video game is supposedly, nobody's really seen much about it, is supposedly going to be an adult
They've
oriented
at this
type of thing.
point at this point they have to know they're aiming at an adult
Yeah.
audience. Do you know what I mean? They say that kidult thing all the time, which makes me
Yeah.
throw up in my mouth. But like they have to know that that is their audience right now for this. So there's no point doing
Right.
a kids cartoon. You might as well just do an animated series in the way that Skybound have done it with with Invincible and things like that, and just
Yeah, and that
that's how
doesn't
you roll.
mean it has to be GI Joe Resolute. I mean, I think
No.
GI Joe Resolute took it, maybe a little bit too far. I mean, if you look, and this is immediately gonna come to everybody's mind. Look at X-Men '97. I
Yeah,
mean, it was clearly
brilliant.
it was brilliant. I could sit down with my kid and watch it. There were moments that are a little bit more mature and adult in theme, and it seemed like as the series went on, they kind of took the reins off more and more. Like you actually
Yeah,
saw Wolverine impale Magneto with his claws, which
yeah, that was
would have been
dark.
unfathomable back in the '90s. But I think X-Men '97 was almost perfectly done from that standpoint. There was mature themes, there's a lot of action, there was some humor interjected. It was accessible to all audiences, but people who are familiar with the brand caught it more. I mean, I've been an X-Men, tertiary X-Men follower for, 30, 40 years, almost as long as G.I. Joe. And I was like watching something like, I don't know who that is. And I went
Mm,
back to the comics and had to learn about Bastion and all these characters that I didn't really know about. So I mean, I think that's a good way to kind of foster awareness of the brand and bring it up. I would hope the X-Men '97 success, Invincible's success, and the kind of the reins that can be removed when you look at things from an animated perspective instead
yeah.
of live action would lend itself to a potential resurgence, of GI Joe in media form. And I
I'd
would
love
just,
to see a follow-on from the Sunbow cartoon in the same way that we saw like the X-Men '97 kind of thing
yeah,
happen. But that would be different to obviously what I would
yeah, that would
on the other
be,
side of it, doing this kind of like Skybound thing would be great. But I'd
yeah.
love to see them do a follow-on from like the end of the movie and just here's a little series, just one series, see how it goes, sort of
Sure.
thing.
I would love that. I think it would be tricky, just because so many of those people are now adults. And the Sumbo series was great. Don't get me wrong. I loved it. The campiness to it, that might be tough for some folks to swallow. But I think I would love to see them give it a try. Even if, like you said, it's like another mini series or just kind of another one more season to kind of wrap up some storylines or something. I think that would be cool. Yeah, there's no reason why they couldn't make it work. Maybe even because I think the GI Joe the movie was a little bit edgier than the standard Sunbow fare. So even if they used that as sort of a template, made
Yeah.
things a little bit edgier, but not totally over the top, I could see that working. The only issue I have is I don't know if you could please everybody.
No.
And you're not going to please everybody with anything. But yeah, I mean, it really opens the door for a lot of different potential explorations of what the brand could be.
Right. So yeah, we're obviously talking about the brand and everything and where it is. Do you feel like it's in a positive place right now? Before we move on, are you kind of happy where the brand is at the moment?
I am. I'm very happy. I think there's a lot of different explorations of the brand for people, for fans of each thing. We haven't even gotten the Super 7 O-ring figures yet. So I think there's a lot of stuff out there for a lot of people to love. I feel really good. I am cautiously optimistic. Like I said, a lot's going to rely on kind of what they do with the movie and what happens with this video game that's probably still a year or two out.
Yeah.
But if they can hit home runs there, which I'll admit with the movie, I don't have a whole lot of confidence, but if they can maybe stop, take a breath, and say the brand is in a really great place right now, let's not f it up. They might be able to put something pretty cool together. But we'll see. Where it is right now, I'm extremely happy with it. I don't know if I could be a whole lot happier. The only thing I could be happier about is if they actually had some kind of decent media going along with it.
Yeah,
beyond the
definitely.
comics, which
Beyond
are
the, yeah,
excellent.
absolutely. Cool. I have to agree. I think the brand's in a crazy good place right now, and obviously we've got Yojo June coming up, so
Man,
we should probably get into that now. So
yeah, we
let's
hadn't
do
even
it.
started talking about that. Wow.
Yes, with Yojo June right around the corner, and I mean like a couple of days away,
2
which is
days.
nuts. We're going to get into a little bit of a preview of what we might expect to see, and also what we're excited we might end up seeing. And of course, we're going to do it based on what we know is coming in 2024. So, Justin, what we know so far is that, of course, we've got this standard retail wave of 4, including Alpine, the Iron Grenadier bat, Iron Grenadiers, and another figure, which we can't divulge at this moment in time. And then we have a smattering of other figures and releases of all shapes and sizes, and deluxe and figure and pet and vehicles and what have you. First off, Yojo June as a thing. Have you come to it? Is this like natural for you now to expect this, or is it's been one of the, because we didn't have this growing up?
No, it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I still kind of struggle to get my head around. A full month of reveals is really awesome, but it's yeah, I'm still not really accustomed to this sort of barrage of information, but I'm thrilled about it. I've been looking back sort of on what we know, kind of what we've gotten. And we don't even have, to my knowledge, we don't even have any digital renders out there right now that haven't been available for pre-order yet.
Right.
So from a news and pre-order perspective, we are pretty much caught up. I mean, there's obviously still some pre-orders that have yet to ship, but beyond sort of those names that you revealed on that previous slide, there isn't a whole lot that we don't know about. So I think this is a really good chance to blow a lot of minds sort of over the next month as they reveal a bunch of stuff pretty regularly throughout the month, which I'm really
Yeah.
excited about.
The other thing as well, I would say, is the only thing we haven't seen actual figures of, but we have got renders for, are the Dragonfly crew.
Oh,
Your
true. Yep.
Night Force, Ripcord, Crazy Legs, and Glenda.
Yep.
Like they're the only ones. And again, like I feel like we're going to get a big update with the Dragonfly during Yojo June. Like I feel like that has to happen at some
Yeah,
point.
that seems natural. Yeah.
And we'll probably see those figures in that month, and they've probably been holding on to it in order to have a decent amount of stuff to show off in
Yeah.
that month. In terms of, I mean, what to expect, I definitely personally am expecting that next retail wave of 4. I'm expecting Alpine, Iron Grenadier bat, Iron Grenadiers, etc. I'm expecting those. Are any of those figures standing out to you as ones that you've kind of been, waiting for a long time?
Oh yeah, Iron Grenadier is probably my favorite sub team in GI Joe. I mean, besides GI Joe and Cobra, I think the IGs are number 3. I am extremely excited to see what they do with those in classified, because I think they have the potential to be very, very cool. They're one of those figures that I think Hasbro could, take some liberties without totally, wrecking the vintage aesthetic. I don't think, they're not like the Crimson Guard, where if you mess with something, collectors are going to freak out. I think they can add a little bit of cool factor to them. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what they do with the Iron Grenadiers. I've really kind of tamped down my army building a little bit. I'm a little nervous to see what the IGs look like, because I could get in trouble.
You have a limit of 20 for each army building, I think.
No.
That's nuts. It's going to be, I think them doing the Iron Grenadier bat and the Iron Grenadiers is kind of fun, because you're going to
Yeah.
get people wanting to build these two up to
Yep.
look really cool together. And I think that's kind of fun. And then obviously
Definitely.
at the moment, it's only going to be Metalhead that's going to be leading the way for those two guys. We don't
Yep.
even have Destro yet, do we? In that
No.
sense, could you see Destro and a Despoiler make its way into this line at some point?
I've been kind of hoping that that's what they do. I've been sort of studying the Despoiler compared to, like, say, the Air Chariot to see, or even the Ferret, to kind of see what the possibility is. I think based on a Ferret price point, they might be able to do that. And I guess the Ferret and the Serpentor with Air Chariot, I guess, were pretty close in price, if I remember right. Wasn't Serpentor like 80 and the Ferret was 75? So maybe it's not Or no, Ferret was
Yeah,
55. Never mind.
54, yeah, 54.99. I think the air chariot was the fact that it was an SDCC
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
thing
Okay.
as well.
So, I mean, yeah, if they can do
Yeah.
a Destro despoiler for the 55 price point or whatever, that would be sick. I mean, I would think that would be really, really awesome.
Think of the
I
figure as well. How good would that figure look like with the half cape? Oh, well, the cape with the one connecting point
Yeah,
and
and you
like
know
the
it's got to be soft goods. I would
yeah.
think they're going to do something cool with the soft goods. I mean, I think that's really got potential to be a great deluxe figure that they get out there, and I'm really looking forward to that. There's just for all this talk about they're going to run out of source material eventually. There's still so much out there that I am really looking forward to, and pretty much all of the Iron Grenadiers are on my short list of stuff to be excited about.
No, I have to agree. I've seen a lot of people say like, "Oh, you know, we're going to run out of characters at some." I'm like, "Don't worry about that. There are plenty of figures that haven't come out yet. You're
Yeah,
looking at our favorite figures haven't come out. My Lightfoot's never going to see the light of day. Hit and
hit
Run.
and
Where's
run.
Hit
Yeah.
and Run? Come on, there's loads of figures to come.
Oh
Loads
yeah,
of figures.
definitely.
Plus, there's another 16 versions of each of the main core characters to come out as well.
Snake Eyes
Um,
version 47. I mean, you
yeah,
gotta. Where are you gonna be
God,
without that?
how many Snake Eyes have we? It's funny that we haven't been overrun with Snake Eyes for a while. I wonder if it was because they brought out a few in that short period of time and then was
Probably.
like, okay, we'll stop doing that now.
Well, yeah, I think they're being smart about it, and I think you're seeing the effects of number one, not marketing for kids, and number two, not having to appease brick and mortar retailers quite as much.
Mm,
Because a lot of people would push back and say, "Oh, it's Hasbro forcing Snake Eyes and Duke and Cobra Commander down your throats." But I'm pretty, knowing people who have worked in the industry, you, the retailers are the one kind of saying we need these core characters. They're the
yeah,
ones driving that, and by doing so much via mail order, I think it allows Hasbro a little bit more flexibility to not. I mean, they had people begging for Duke before they released Retro Duke. I mean, people
yeah,
saying, "Come on, give us more Duke." I mean that just didn't happen back in the day. And I think Snake Eyes is the same way. We've gotten a lot of Snake Eyes, and I'm sure we'll still get a lot more Snake Eyes, but they're doing it more intelligently. It seems like they're kind of spacing it out. They're giving us some breathing room without them. I think they're doing a good job with that stuff.
yeah, definitely. So we've got a standard retail wave of four, which we're expecting, but then it's anyone's guess with everything else. I mean,
Yeah,
I can definitely see them drop in the retro wave. I could definitely see them drop in 60th anniversary figures, mainly just because that's usually when they come out in a certain cadence,
sure.
and obviously we haven't had 60th for a while, and I'm kind of excited to see this Action Marine and Action Pilot,
Yeah,
honestly.
for sure. And I mean, if they wait too long to give a 60th anniversary, it's going to be 61st anniversary. So
Yeah, it's going to be different, completely different thing.
yeah,
We have to, well, it's likely going to call it Legacy based on that leak listing we
that's
had
probably
from
true. Yeah,
2025. But
yeah.
yeah, that's a very good point. It'd be the 61st anniversary. We're not doing that again. Calling things the 60th anniversary
Oh, that
10
just gets
years
us in
down the
trouble.
line. Yeah,
Yeah, it just
let's
gets
not
us in
do that.
trouble.
What are there any on there that kind of like pique your interest? Any kind of
Oh
figures on the
yeah, I
horizon?
mean, you kidding me? Nemesis Immortal and Raptor. I mean, I am like sitting on the edge of my seat to see what they end up doing with those because they're going to be sort of deluxe type of figures. I mean, we already know Raptor is. I mean, they say DLX right in the code name, so obviously they're
Yeah, yeah,
deluxe. But Raptor is kind of an SDCC exclusive. I think is a really really cool avenue to kind of really show off this character. Nemesis Immortal, I just it's interesting because as a kid, I kind of bristled at Cobra Law a bit, but
right.
I have such an appreciation for them as time has gone on and their place in the lore. And I think part of why I didn't really latch onto them as kids is the action figures compared to how they appeared in the cartoon were, they didn't really match up. They didn't, the characters in the GI Joe movie were fantastic. Globulus with his huge winding tail, Nemesis Enforcer was huge with his massive wings, and then you got the figures, and they were kind of short and stubby, and didn't have that sort of vibe that you had in the cartoon. So I think the opportunity to see what Classified can do with a Nemesis Immortal and just make this huge figure with this massive wingspan. I mean, who knows if that's what we'll end up getting, but I just think there's so much potential for a great figure that I'm really looking forward to. I'm not looking forward to figuring out where I'm going to display him. I mean, I'm looking up, next to my GI Joe Classified line on the shelf right above me, I've got gargoyles, and a lot of those gargoyles have big wingspans, and it's like, man,
He's
what
going
am
to
I
fit
going to do
in.
with Nemesis Enforcer? But
He's going to
or
fit right
Nemesis
in. He's going to
Immortal. Yeah,
He's going to
exactly.
be a new character in
I'll just put him
Gargoyles,
in the
isn't he?
gargoyles display. Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
But yeah, I mean, those two, Raptor is sort of an underrated thing to me. I mean, I think most folks know from my sort of Thundercats fandom. For whatever reason, I love this sort of cryptid idea where people are part animal, part human, and kind of
Yeah,
have enhanced abilities because of. And the first book I ever wrote was about a werewolf soldier or whatever. So I mean, I really love that kind of transformative aspect of human beings who have these animal powers. So even though Raptor doesn't necessarily have animal powers, I think the idea of that part bird mentality just has always appealed to me. And I remember getting him at retail at a KB Toys back in '87,
right.
and he was just kicking everybody's ass. He was flying, he was like clawing people. He was this creature that from another world. And I saw the comic, and he was just some accountant in a bird suit, and I was like, oh, come on now, he could be so much cooler than that.
I think Classified has a really good opportunity here to kind of do what the club used to do with some weirder characters.
Yeah,
And they'd bring them out as as like a new figure and with some new parts, and it would just be like, this figure's incredible all of a sudden. So I feel like
I could
Classified had that opportunity to really
definitely.
breathe some life into the ridiculousness and the detail of this one.
I could see them doing some funny stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he comes like on a briefcase or something silly, like a calculator or some kind of accountant's gear. Because
Yeah.
he's a deluxe SDCC figure, they cram those full of accessories. I could see them doing some pretty fun stuff with that, but I also think they could really, you know, really beef up the actual figure itself into some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. So, sorry, it may be weird that everyone is now seeing that I'm wearing a t-shirt, so I'm just going to point that out. I just had to take my jacket off, and I edited it, so it looks weird. Sorry, guys. Yes. So basically, we know that Raptor is SDCC, so we won't be seeing him till July. Or you never know, we might get like a render of it, because I was having this conversation the other day, Justin. The only exclusive we've seen renders of before they've been revealed are the Baroness and the Twins for the PulseCon exclusive.
That's
Everything
true.
else was only ever revealed on the day or leaked the day before for the event.
That's a good
And
point.
I don't think I can remember. I went through all of them, and I couldn't remember any that was shown as a render beforehand. So apart
Yeah.
from that 3-pack, so it's a possibility we see Raptor in June, but it's also we might not.
Yeah, I
So
wouldn't be surprised if we don't. Yeah, based on that information, I hadn't really thought of that aspect of it, but yeah, you're right on that one. That is possible that we won't.
I could see Nemesis Immortal being rendered
Sure.
revealed.
We've known
Android
about him
Pig.
forever, and he, we've seen pieces and parts out of China that show that he's clearly being worked on. So I mean,
That's a
I
good
would
point. I
I
forgot
would
about
be
that.
shocked if we didn't see a render of him at least
Forgot
in
about the
Yojo June.
parts. It's amazing how much is leaked that
I
I've
know.
completely forgotten. Raptor. We've seen Raptor
Oh yeah,
parts leaked.
yeah.
Jeez, I forgot about that as well. Has we seen anything else? Oh, Marauder Sarge, obviously. That's
Oh
that's
yeah,
a
we saw that
possibility. It's
potato
a
phone image
possibility
of
we could
Marauder
see.
Sarge. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a possibility we could see the Marauder Sarge and
sure.
the 2-pack of Low Light and Spirit. For me, I'm probably going to go out and say I'm really excited, weirdly, for Alpine, and that is probably going to segue nicely into the next segment, because we're going to be talking about Alpine, spoiler alert, in our version therapy. But I will say that that's a standard retail figure, so it's going to have this. I mean, we've had standard retail figures that are packed with accessories.
Sure.
We still do to this day. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Alpine's going to be absolutely stacked, is it?
No, not at all. And I would love for them to do some interesting stuff with him. I think if they could somehow do his cool grappling rifle where the hook kind of detaches and has some string, that might be a little bit too much to hope for, but I think that would be really cool if they could do that. And I think, come to think, I mean, he comes with his backpack, his like pick, his submachine gun, and that kind of grapple rifle. So
that pick is massive, isn't it?
yeah,
I forgot about how massive that pick was.
Yeah. So yeah, they could do some cool stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they did something with his goggles and his hat. Maybe the hat's removable and the goggles are removable. I mean, yeah, they could stack that guy up pretty nicely.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about it then, because we might as well
Sure.
get into it, and that's version therapy, and that will finish us off for the day. Gross. Yes, we are talking version therapy. Now, last month, Justin and I discussed our favorite movie figures. We kind of switched it up a little bit, if you remember that, Justin.
Yep.
But instead of doing like, a one character, and we just chose from our favorite movie-based figures. So obviously, we're coming back to normal in this episode, and we're looking at, based on his possible inclusion in Yojo June, Alpine. Now, first of all, Justin, take us through your thoughts of the character a little bit, but then obviously lead into your choice as well.
Yeah, I mean, Alpine's always been an interesting one for me because, he's always, to me, just kind of been, Bazooka's buddy. I mean, that's really where he got most of his visibility, was in the Sunbow cartoon as
Yes.
partner to Bazooka, which is great. I mean, he's sort of the more serious one, and Bazooka's the more jovial one, although Alpine tells his share of jokes too. So it's interesting because that's really been his primary influence. He did appear in the Marvel comics, but it was very sporadic, and you didn't really get a whole lot of feel for the character. I think in IDW had an interesting role. Where no, it wasn't Alpine. It was actually Iceberg. I was thinking about the guy who lost his legs, but
no, that was Alpine, wasn't it?
It was. I thought it was Iceberg, but maybe it was Alpine.
I'm pretty sure. Oh, now I'm gonna have to think. I think there was.
See, if we only had a PDF, we could just check it real quick.
If only there was a PDF in 279,896, by the way. 1279896.
That's insane.
Unbelievable.
I think whether he lost his legs or not, I seem to remember Alpine playing a pretty big role in the IDW comics. But not to get on too much of a tangent, but that was sort of the issue with the IDW comics. Is a bunch of
it was Alpine. They gave him the blades. Yeah.
Okay. He just a lot of these characters just kind of appear in camouflage uniforms in the IDW series, so it's like you don't really have a feel for who they are. But anyway, yeah. So Alpine has been sort of one of those characters that's timeless. It's been around since '85. A lot of people know about him, but he's just, his main personality is sort of partnered with Bazooka and kind of how they play off each other, which is great. He gets a lot more screen time than a lot of other characters. So that's kind of what I remember him by, him being that semi-jokester who, kind of pokes fun and
yodeling.
And also just the ridiculousness of his file card, how his real name is Alpine, and that's his code name.
Albert. Alpine. Pine. Unbelievable.
But no, he's a cool character. I will admit I don't have a very strong affinity for him. I mean, I do love how he played off Bazooka in the Sunbow cartoon, but if you were to ask me to list, my 20 top G.I. Joe characters, he probably wouldn't make it. But I think he's a pretty big name from an '85 Sunbow perspective. So I think he's on a lot.
What's funny, Alpine. I just want while you mentioned that, there was a fan club pack in the UK that we had, an Action Force fan club pack, green pack that opens it's like a little button down thing opens up, and it has like lots of cool stuff in it, like tapes and games and stuff. And they cut out like some very high quality gloss paper file cards and put them in there. There was Snake Eyes and some other, but Alpine was one of them that was in there.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
I was always very much like, very into, because again, Alpine was utilized in the UK comics as well.
Yep.
But that's just made me think of that when you were talking about how as a kid you got him, and it just reminded me of that fan club thing and the connectivity. But yeah, so anyway, what's your choice?
This was a little bit of a tough one. I remember getting into some wars back in the early 2000s because there was a lot of people who kind of made fun of the new sculpt Alpine in his shorts and his t-shirt, and they kind of harassed him a little bit. And I actually kind of liked that version of the figure. I liked the way the Collectors Club did it with version 6, but ultimately I just felt like the classic version from '85 was really what everybody knows the character for, and really had sort of the most flair to me, that really cool layered vest, and I really liked kind of the arm guards he's got. That grapple hook gun is just so awesome. Even though I wish the grapple could kind of come off and actually be a grapple gun. That's why I kind of hope they do that in Classified, because that was always sort of a missed opportunity to me. But yeah, the figure is really, really cool. That vintage figure, it's just got a lot of classic greatness about it. It has military elements, yet looks very unique to G.I. Joe. So I ultimately had to go with the vintage original for this one.
It is a beauty, and you're right. It's got lots of cool aspects to it. And of course, the modern kind of 4-inch versions, some hit, some miss. But I would say that I like the fact they did the secondary as like a smaller jacket sort of thing over the
Yeah.
top. So yeah, I kind of hope that kind of returns for the classified figure. And they also maybe even have another secondary, a separate one with the rope, so that you can have the rope off if you want,
Oh, I
rather
bet.
than
Yeah.
connecting it to the jacket sort of thing.
Sure.
But they have in the past done secondaries that have other things connected to them.
Hmm.
I think I'm thinking more so actually of like Tunnel Rat Classified, which is like a buckaroo of items.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's like a secondary and then a rope and then a satchel and it's like
Yep.
and then the scarf, and you're like, all of those are separate, and it's like can be a little bit buckaroo to kind of line them up. But I wouldn't mind if they were two separate secondaries on this particular figure.
It would be cool. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they could do that with the arms. I think you always run into a challenge with jackets versus vests, because I know I called it a vest, but it's kind of more of a jacket. And yeah, how do you take the vest off, or the yeah, whatever that is off, without affecting the sleeve? I mean, it's an interesting idea, but yeah, I'm all for favor whatever they can do secondaries of. I'm a fan of it because it really allows for some customization. You can kind of take stuff off and make them look more natural, or do whatever you want to do. So however they can work that out, that would be awesome.
Yeah, you could always put like someone else's bear arms on the, not like a
Sure.
literal bear, but if you were customizing, you could put like human arms on
Absolutely.
it. Yeah, the helmet and the goggles as well. I would assume they're going to go with a kind of
Yeah,
removable
I
scenario
would
there.
think so. That seems to be their MO for pretty much any goggles that appear. They may find some way to make them removable, which is cool.
But this figure as well, there's a satisfying element to this figure in the design and the way that the sculpt works on it. There's just so many brilliant things about this figure. You're right. I think the V1 is like a very, very awesome version, and like again, hard to beat. And I genuinely don't think the 25th version does beat this version. I feel
No.
like the O-ring is definitely the better version of the two.
Yeah, I can't really explain why the 25th didn't quite hit the mark for me, because they clearly tried to mirror the Alpine look. And I remember for a long time that figure was very high demand. Like you could only get it in some mass device 5-pack or whatever that was
Yeah.
short shipped. So it was a lot of people clamoring for it. I think at one point it was selling for tons of money on eBay. But yeah, there was just something about the figure that didn't quite live up. I can't really explain what it is. It's been so long since I've had it in hand, but
I think the proportions mainly were a bit
yeah, I mean, they
weird here and
reused
there.
Snowjob's legs. I seem to remember that, and maybe the arms were a little funky. I don't
If you
remember
took this,
fully.
yeah, if you took the secondary off, he looked weird, obviously,
Oh
because it was
yeah,
like the white vest
exactly.
and the giant jacket arms.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, this is perfect. This is one of my favorite O-ring kind of designs. Like it just looks so good, and
yeah.
it's a really well pulled together figure. But my version, Justin, is the complete opposite of this one. Not only have I gone for the modern 4-inch version of Alpine, but I've gone for one that kind of has the weirdest double crossover sort of homage tactic applied to it. And it takes a little bit of explaining, but I went with this version, the Club 2016, is it? I think it's
I think so.
2016. The Club helicopter crew Tiger Force Alpine that is obviously utilizing the FSS Alpine body as well, and obviously in a different deco.
Hmm.
But the funny thing about this is this wasn't the Tiger Force version of the figure back in the New Sculpt era. The
No.
New Sculpt era was the green shirt, like that was the one that was the FSS version, if that makes sense. That
Yep.
was technically the Tiger Force one originally. And so what they did was, because obviously they repainted that version in like a yellow and kind of like this beautiful red color scheme. But that wasn't the Tiger Force version. That was just another deco of it, wasn't it? So you end up with the Club sort of taking both of those ideas, the actual Tiger Force element that Alpine was in, and putting it onto this deco, which kind of makes more sense, honestly.
Definitely.
And I always thought it was like a really cool way of, homaging the Tiger Force Alpine, but doing it in a deco that was kind of cool and made the most out of the yellow and the red. And I must admit, that whole like group of exclusives, I have such a fond like love. Like I love that the
Yeah.
Tiger Hawk, the friggin' Tiger Hawk, like the blimmin' Tomahawk deck, like Tiger Force version,
Yeah.
stunning, absolutely stunning. And then like all the figures that came with it, all the vehicles, Bazooka and friggin' Felino, and there's so many. There's so many. Big
Frostbite.
Brawler, Frostbite's so good, so good. But all of and so many cool vehicles. Man, we were spoiled back then, were we not?
Oh, it's crazy to look back and see exactly. I mean, I don't think people recall or remember that we actually got more figures in the modern era than we did in the vintage era. You
Yep,
know, I mean, it's just and not by a little, like by a lot.
by a
You know,
lot.
so it's pretty crazy. And back then it was the same thing. You know, they did 20th anniversary for a few years. Everybody's like, well, they're going to run out of characters eventually. You know, how are they going to do? And yet it continued on like for 10 years beyond that. You know, it's um, yeah, there really was some unique opportunities with the GI Joe convention. Something we're kind of missing a little bit these days. I know there's Joe Fest and other stuff, but getting the officially kind of actual factory produced exclusive figures that go along with those shows, you know, it's unfortunate we don't have that opportunity still.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was. I used to love convention time so much, like the lead up to it, figuring out, you know, finding out what the theme was, what, you know,
Oh.
the slow burn of character reveals, and
In
um,
fact, dude, this Tiger Force one, this was the one we drove up to. This was
yeah,
Springfield,
we were
wasn't
like
it?
in the car as they
Yeah.
started revealing this, and I remember like
You
on the
woke me up.
comic or like looking at phone images or
You
whatever,
woke
and
me up to
yeah,
tell, like, because it was like, oh, it was like midnight or something at that
oh,
point.
some crazy,
You were
yeah,
still driving, and I remember you waking me up I was in the back
yeah,
seat, and you were like, the images are coming through from the. I'm like, what? And we were just you
yeah,
had the phone on the front, and we were like looking at everything. Oh my
yeah.
god, man, that was a crazy
Oh, it was
drive.
great. That was so
That
much fun.
that was crazy. And yeah, and like I remember getting there and Glenn Winkler coming running out with the big box full of like all the exclusives, and
Oh
because we were
man,
late getting there, weren't we?
we were a
Basically,
little late. Yeah, I mean,
we had to stop
usually,
at Kokomo.
yeah, exactly. Usually I try to be there like for the Friday preview or whatever, but you know, we took us 2 days to drive and we kind of took our time, and which was fine. I think we really had a great time and stopped at
Yeah,
Kokomo, like you said. It was one of my most fondest trips that I can remember. So I think we did it the right way,
yeah.
but yeah, we got there a little late, but still it was a blast.
That was awesome. Anyway, this is my favorite version of
Yep.
Alpine, definitely. And again, I love the execution of this figure was great. The deco just looks stunning, and
Hmm.
I thought it was a really great way, like I said, to kind of incorporate the Tiger Force aspect
Yeah,
without just doing the Tiger Force one, which was kind of like just a very generic green, and like it wasn't like
it was.
crazy Tiger Force, which is what you expect, isn't it? Basically,
Yeah, I
in
mean,
these.
Hasbro back in that new sculpt era would just kind of throw a few stripes and change the paint scheme a little bit and say, "Yeah, this is a Tiger Force." You know, I mean, it wasn't full blown. So I definitely supported the club going more whole hog with this deco, especially considering what else came with the set.
Yeah, so that's it. That's my one. And it's just those shorts. You don't see the shorts very often. It's like Quinn, him, Dull Sim.
Yep.
Not many shorts in the GI Joe universe.
Yeah,
You
yeah, and
got
that's, that was the version that I kind of liked was the FSS version of it. This version is very cool too, but one of the ones
yeah,
that I was tempted to pick was the FSS version, the version 6, which used those shorts because, Quinn from the GI Joe Retaliation line, just, the articulation was so awesome. Just that era of figures was just so
brilliant.
immaculately well
Yeah.
made that it's tough to turn away from those.
And shout out to Adam Riches for doing the artwork for that Alpine FSS figure as
Absolutely,
well. Yeah.
absolutely.
Anyway, yeah, that is it. That's our version therapy sorted. Let us know in the comments, guys, what version of Alpine is your favorite. And I would honestly expect very soon, like next week, to be seeing something that looks a little bit more like this.
Yep.
But anyway, there you go, Justin, buddy. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining me again for this one, bud, and it's been fun. Yeah, let us know in the comments all of the things. Like, first of all, let us know in the comments how you feel the GI Joe brand is at the moment. Do you feel like it's are you as positive about it as we are? Are you excited about the Skybound kind of compendium Kickstarter, which is just getting so close to 1.3 million?
Unbelievable.
What? And there's still like 26 days or 27 days to go.
I,
Mental.
yeah, that is mental is a good way to put it. It reminds me a lot of how we were looking at the Hiss tank classified
Yeah.
HasLab. We're kind of like, did this just earn the most money in the shortest amount of time in HasLab history? I mean, what's going on here? And it just kept on going all the way through. So yeah, I'm expecting nothing. I mean, not to the degree of $1.2 million, but yeah, I'm expecting this to just keep on rocketing.
Well, good luck to them anyway. And also let us know in the comments what you're most excited for about Yojo June. And of course, all the other comments too, whatever, just as long as it's not nasty, thanks. And directed at us too, because that's always harsh.
You can rip me apart if you want. I don't read the comments, so
yeah, Justin doesn't care.
Yourself.
Right then, I'll be back. Well, we'll be back for more of this good stuff for the weekly for Yojo June. We'll be covering it as much as possible, and I'll be probably doing live events every 40 minutes. Justin, great to have you back on again, buddy. I'll see you on the next one, pal. Stay fresh, cheese bags, and after 3, you know what to do. 1, 2, 3.
Full force.
Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on X, formerly Twitter, @TheFullForce, liking the Facebook page, facebook.com/TheFullForce. We've also added a brand new Instagram, so check us out there as well @TheFullForce Podcast, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on any of those platforms with feedback and questions. We also have a Patreon page, so if you want to show your support for the show, see your name up in lights on these videos, or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/TheFullForce Podcast, or click on the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force.